So hi, Elliot.
Hi, Keith.
Yeah, Elliot's a student of mine. He's a classically trained pianist and he's a choral conductor. And anything else you want to say about your background?
Um, Mainly, I got into music because I fell in love with Beethoven.
Oh,
So I
beautiful.
just wanted to, I just wanted to know more about it. So I started off wanting to be an orchestral conductor and ended up, and all of my work was working with choirs. So that's how my career developed.
So you've spent many years studying classical piano, obviously, because you're a very, very good pianist.
32 years.
Yeah, wow. So how did you get interested in jazz?
Jazz was one of those things that I always knew that I should appreciate, but I didn't know, I couldn't connect with it. And I got in the car one day and pulled up John Coltrane,
Yeah,
and the track was my favorite things. And for some reason, I loved McCoy Tyner's solo.
yeah,
I just couldn't not listen to it for days, and I listened to it probably 30, 40 times. And I thought, I have to know more about this.
yeah. So did you, when you decided that you wanted to know more about it, did you start looking into, like, did you look into any books or what did you try to pursue it? How did you pursue it at first?
Yeah, I have a friend who's a jazz pianist, and we chatted on the phone two or three times, and I got Mark Levine's book and started trying to teach myself, and then decided I wanted some guidance.
Yeah. So did you think the book was helping you, or was it just not the right kind of information that you needed, or
It's weird. I tend to be very much a traditionalist, so the idea of maybe it's a lack of faith in my own understanding of music, but I felt like I couldn't succeed at jazz without guidance. So
Okay.
I've just never thought outside the box of, well, maybe I could have taught myself.
Yeah. Well, that's something important. I think it's hard to learn this music from books, so that's why I asked that question. But we'll get to that at another time, you know. But I wanted to ask you, why did you choose me to study with?
Well, I had met you at Furman through the Keyboard Institute,
Right.
and just I didn't want to study with somebody who kind of dabbled with jazz. I wanted somebody, study with somebody that really lived it.
Yeah.
So and you're the only person in Greenville that I felt could help me with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think I have helped you with it?
I do.
Yeah. How can you tell me how I've helped you with it?
Thinking about voicings, I played for church for years, and I've improved for years, but I've never thought about what my hands were doing. So a lot of times, my chords might have 5/5 and no root or no third, and you've really helped me think about voicing and intentionality and color.
And how about the idea of improvisation? What is that? What's happened with your understanding of improvisation from studying?
That it's a lifelong process.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
the harmony, that the harmonic aspect, I felt like within a month of working together, I had a good understanding of that. But
Yeah.
the improv, I just get in my own way. I'm afraid of making mistakes.
Yeah, well,
So
I think that's natural. I think we all have that. You have to sort of overcome that.
yeah.
So, as far as in connection with the harmony, how is it different from what you learned studying classical music? What I've taught you, how is it different from what you learned studying classical music?
That's a good question. Um, I don't think it's really any different. It's just like a different lane.
Yeah. Okay.
More tensions, but those are in Bach too. I think one thing with classical playing is, how you move from note to note was so important, trying to, and it is in jazz as well, but it kind of, as long as all members of the chord are represented, it feels freer in jazz. Like I might have a third in the tenor and then a third in the alto, but I don't think as much about how I got there as I did with classical. But I really think it's the same. I think it's the same road. It's just different lanes.
I think of it as a different language almost because it's a different way of thinking about harmony, don't you think?
Very much.
I mean, it's more seventh chord based than a lot
Yeah.
than classical music.
Well, yeah, and that's the idea that a major seventh is now stable.
Right.
That was, and I've had people at church, because I work at a church, and I'll do improvs, and I've gotten to where I put a lot of sixths and sevenths on everything. And people come up afterwards and they're like, why don't you resolve it? And I've gotten to the point where I've said, well, it is.
Yeah.
The seventh in this language is resolved. It's stable. So my ears are adjusting to that.
Yeah, so that brings up another topic. It's about listening too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So have you found that studying jazz has made you listen differently?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Can you say anything about that?
Mainly just more intentionality of how I color chords.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any
Yeah.
that makes any
Yeah,
sense.
you start to hear the colors
Yeah.
more and how they fit, how the harmonies lend themselves to certain colors according to what the harmony's doing. Is that
Yeah,
sort of
very
say
much
that?
so.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really important, I think, as well. So how do you think you're doing? Tell me what do you think about your progress so far?
For at this phase in my life, for the amount of time I'm able to dedicate to it, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah. I think you should be. I think you're doing great. So I think you should be. Yeah.
Well, it's the kind of thing, if I were, you go back and look at, my teacher in Cincinnati said, practice all you can now, because when you get a job, you'll want to find time to practice and you won't be able to.
I tell my students that same thing all the time. Of course, when you're young, you don't get it, but now that I'm 60 something,
And I feel like if I had 3 hours a day to dedicate it to it, I feel like I could get to maybe where I want to get with it. But hopefully I can do that over the years.
Yeah, I think you're making great progress.
Thank you.
I have one more question.
Sure.
I think this is important. I noticed this because I work with a lot of classical pianists, that are like at Furman, for example. A lot of my students there are actually classical pianists that come to me because they want to learn about jazz like you.
Mm-hmm.
So I notice, and I think this is true, I'm asking you, I noticed something different about the way you have to touch the piano. Like when you play phrasing, jazz phrasing is different, I think, from classical phrasing. Thinking about how you phrase, and I think that has to do with how you approach the piano physically and technically as well. What do you think about that? Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, because I think that so much of the music that we learn as classical pianists is just abstract, and jazz is rooted in the voice. So I think actually as a choral conductor, I should be thinking of it more vocally, but just so much of it coming out of the Great American Songbook.
Right.
I think the great jazz pianists are more vocal.
Actually, that's interesting. A friend of mine, Frank, who I talk about all the time, Frank Kimbrough, was a great jazz pianist. He said to me a few years ago that he finally realized that jazz is folk music. And I think that's what he means, is like it's passed down from one generation to the next, and we learn it by listening. You have to listen to this music if you want to play it. You can't just pick up a book and go, okay, I'm going to learn to play jazz. And you have to listen to this music if you're going to understand how it feels, find out how it feels, and understand how to reproduce that yourself. So anyway, well, that's great. I appreciate your taking the time to do this little short interview.
Oh, pleasure.
And we'll do a longer one coming up here soon.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks, Elliot.
Thanks, Keith.